Lovely. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's planning committee. I'd like to welcome all members of the committee, officers and members of the public, and also those councillors that are representing their wards this evening to our meeting. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to ask the committee clerk, Susan Ledane, to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those who are attending remotely.
Good evening. Rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the results will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I will now hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Susan. Right, so item number 1, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from councillors Ruth Brown, Sadie Billing and Amy Allen. Having given due notice, councillor Steve Jarvis will be substituting for councillor Brown, councillor Val Bryant will be substituting for councillor Billing and councillor Mick Debenham will be substituting for councillor Allen. Thank you, everyone. Are there any further apologies? I see everybody else is present and correct at this moment in time, except for councillor Muir. I will then move us on to item number 2, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September 2024. I propose that we take as read and approve the minutes of the meetings held on the 26th of September 2024 as a true record of proceedings. Could I please have a seconder? I see councillor Mason. Yes, thank you. Mic on, mic off. Lovely. Are there any comments on the minutes? I'm seeing nobody indicate. So could we have a vote, please, Susan?
Yeah, that motion is carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Notification of any other business. There has been none. Chair's announcements. Recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the council's YouTube channel as well as on the council's ModGov site alongside the documents from tonight's meeting. Number 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and a detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item number 3, to clarify matters for registered speakers. So when it comes around to your turn to speak, members of the public in groups of supporters or objectors have up to 3 minutes per person. If there's only one member of the public speaking as a supporter or an objector on any of the applications tonight, then that person will have a whole 5 minutes to make your case. There are separate groups of people registered as member advocate objectors and member advocate supporters for the applicant, their agent or representative. This is up to 5 minutes per group. All speakers will receive a warning when you have around about 1 minute remaining. If you are in the middle of a sentence, I am not going to interrupt and cut across you and tell you you've got 1 minute. I find that disruptive. I think a lot of people would find that off-putting. I will wait until there's a natural break or you to pause for breath or use a comma, and I'll let you know roughly how much time you've got left. There's also a countdown clock that you'll be able to see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen as well, if you're one of those people that's able to keep an eye on those things. I won't cut you off mid-flow when the time runs out, but I will sort of be watching and appreciate you wrapping up as swiftly as you're able to do at that point in time. And at the end of your allotted time, I will tell you that your time has ended. And if I think you're carrying on too far beyond things and it's no longer adding value to the committee, I will ask you to stop. Right, so Number 4, section 4.8.23a of the Constitution, for the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. In the event that we need to take breaks or comfort breaks, I'll be mindful of the business on the agenda. But as always, members, if you do need to pause or leave the room at any moment, please indicate and I will halt proceedings to support you. Item number 5, withdrawal of an item. Agenda item number 6, which is the application number 24/00444 FP, has been withdrawn from the agenda as the applicant has withdrawn the application. Therefore, there's no longer any matter for this committee to consider. So we've got a relatively short agenda this evening, colleagues, and we can devote our full attention to the 2 items that remain. Agenda order, I've agreed to change the published agenda order and we'll be taking agenda item number 8, which is 14 Oakfields Avenue in Nebworth, at the retention of anthracite grey windows, ahead of the other agenda item, which is agenda item number 7. Public participation, I have got 4. Yes, I have got 4 people representing in the public participation section, and those are Peter Calver. Yes, thank you. Vivian Phillips-Tate, Councillor Paul Ward, and Lee Alexander. Yes, thank you. Excellent. Everybody is here. Good. Right. In which case, shall remove that. I shall move us on to the first substantive item of business this evening, which is application 2400952/FPH, 14 Oakfields Avenue, Nebworth, Hertfordshire, SG3 6NP. Thomas, would you like to present your report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I have a couple of updates for this application. In my report, I referenced that there were 2 objections when in fact there were 5, but their contents and material matters raised were discussed in report and considered during the application. Also, there is a slight amendment to the description, should relate to the retention of a side door as well. So that's the main matters at hand. I have since recently spoken to Councillor Ward in an email exchange just seeking clarification of Nebworth Neighbourhood Plan policies and their application in my report and in my decision making, where I confirmed that I used KBBE 4, which is a design policy, and also confirmed that I did not give weight to protected view policies, as the site is outside of a protected view as defined by the Nebworth Neighbourhood Plan. I've also received a late comment or representation/comment from Mr. Glencross, the applicant, where he basically sought to clarify that the application site is not within a character area as defined by the neighbourhood plan, and that Oakfields Road is defined as the character area rather than the avenue in the neighbourhood plan. The email also advised that the original window colour for the road was bottle green, and that this was discovered during prior painting works to the windows of the house by a prior owner. So with the application is before you due to a call-in by Councillor Ward following an objection by Nebworth Parish Council, and my recommendation is counter to their recommendation, which was an objection. I must emphasise that the material considerations before you relate to the windows and the door and their impact, and not the matter of a copper beech tree that was previously felled on site. Another matter raised in representations was the ridgeline of the property and whether the plans were representative of the site. I've since received confirmation that the ridgeline is incomplete and will be completed, and therefore the prior plans that were approved will be complied with in that sense. Though, as I say, this application purely relates to the retention of the windows and the side door. Please can I have my presentation? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. And the following slide, please. Thank you. This is the site plan as present on site, with the structures previously approved shown in grey. Next slide, please. And this is the as approved side elevation with the previously approved windows showing glazing bars. The next slide, please. And then this is the as approved, so the prior permission principal and rear elevations showing windows with glazing bars. The prior colour was white as approved. And the next slide, please. And this is the presently the plans before you showing the grey windows minus glazing bars to the principal and rear elevations together with grey bifold doors. Next slide, please. And then there's the windows to the side elevation and the door to side elevation minus the glazing bars and in anthracite grey. The next slide, please. This is the rear elevation with the windows seeking retention in anthracite grey. Next slide, please. And the principal elevation taken from the driveway area showing the windows as existing on site now. Next slide, please. And then there's a closer in photo from the right-hand side of the principal elevation showing the windows present on site. Next slide, please. And this is an older photo from May showing the site presently under construction with the windows in place. This is taken from the end of the driveway adjacent to the footpath. Next slide, please. And then a further back shot from about the centre of the road showing the house within the surrounding area. Next slide, please. Oh, that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any questions or points of clarification they wish to ask Thomas? Yes, Councillor Tyson.
I don't know if this is the right moment to ask this question, but I think we're here because of a discrepancy between the previous application and the current what's been built, and obviously this is a retrospective application. So is it possible to clarify what has changed now in that the previous application it was recommended that the external materials should match the existing dwelling house. I assume that that includes the construction of the windows in terms of the materials. But in this application, which you're recommending be approved, that is no longer the case.
Yes, so this is seeking to retain the windows. Yes, they were approved as white under that condition, but this now seeks to retain the windows in place as anthracite grey. So I guess the extensions were built as approved effectively, but it's the windows that differ from that permission.
Can I just specify what I actually meant? The question I was asking was
Sure.
why and what has changed to change your mind on that? Because in the previous application, it was a condition that the external materials should match the existing house.
Sure.
And now that's no longer the case.
Oh, well, I've considered the application, the windows in place. I've seen them in place on site, and I considered that they were acceptable in planning terms. So I understand that we considered it was okay to condition matching materials, but I've also considered that the windows in place and as seen on site are acceptable in design terms as well. So yeah, that was it really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peace.
I think my question is a sort of follow-up to that one. So in the normal run of things, if an applicant wanted to make a change to their windows, would they usually approach you first before making that change?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mantle.
Yeah, I'm not clear what the approved development is matching them to. So which was are some of the windows on the building as original and unchanged, and then these are the new windows as a part of the approved extension, or am I missing something?
So the previous approval was to match to the existing house, but I don't believe any old windows remain on
That
site.
was what
So I think
was
they've all been
thinking.
changed.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions indicated. Nope. All right, in which case I shall move us on to our next speaker, which is the applicant's agent, Lee Alexander. Lee, oh, I am on the wrong page. You're absolutely right. I'm up here, not down there. There we go. Here we go. That's much better. Public objectors. That seems right. Lovely. So first, I have got 2 objectors on this item, so you'll each have a total of 3 minutes. As per Chair's announcements, I will let you know appropriately and support you as best I can. The first person I have listed to speak is Peter Calver. So Peter, you've got 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Peter Calver and I live at 12 Oakfields Avenue next to the application site. I hope the committee members have had the opportunity to review the history of the multiple applications and the objections to developments at the site, both recent and historical. Reading the report of this application, I'm frankly amazed at what I see. The planning report is certainly not objective and seems to be an exercise in justifying the applicant's reasons for ignoring the council's planning policies and the conditions imposed by the council on granting the various previous applications by the applicant at this address. What is the point of the council's planning policies, imposing planning conditions and then allowing them to be ignored or overridden? A case in point at this address was the applicant signing the declaration in the applications that no trees were to be felled, backing this up with an email between the council planning department and the applicant's agent declaring the same, and then carrying on to fell an 80-plus-year-old significant tree on the boundary between numbers 14 and 12 early on a Sunday morning while I was away and there was a TPO pending. I feel the current application is effectively the same. The submitted drawings showed Georgian-style windows, and the conditions on granting the application stated the colours and materials should match the existing surrounding properties. The application was determined and granted on that basis. The specification for the windows as doors was that they should match the existing property, and that was known prior to construction and has been blatantly ignored. Some aspects of the report are factually incorrect. That's been corrected by Mr. Howe. There were in fact 6 objections, including objections from the Knibbeth Parish Council, Planning Committee and the Ward Councillor. Clearly the planning report has discounted these objections and I believe they should bear some weight. There are no other visible properties in Oakfields Avenue with other than white windows, and most have Georgian bars. It states that there are other properties' garage doors of various colours. However, in the context of the street scene, none of such a size and prominence as displayed directly on the front of number 14 are generally to the side and rear of their host dwelling. The report acknowledges the established pattern of the neighbourhood as a degree of uniformity of fenestration style, and the planning policies and actual grant of the previous application for this property show this should be adhered to. So I'm at a loss to understand how planning control are prepared to recommend to diverge from such essential principles and previously imposed conditions. The solution is simple: replacement of the offending windows and doors to the approved granted specification. This application should be refused.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to time. That was excellent. Well done. Do members of the Planning Committee have any questions or points of clarification that you'd like to raise? No, I'm seeing nobody indicate. In that case, I will move on to our second public objector, which is Vivian Phillips-Tate. Vivian, you've got 3 minutes as well.
My name is Vivian Phillips-Tate. I live at number 9 Oakfields Avenue, directly opposite the application site. I concur with points made by Mr. Calver and wish to raise points about process and impact upon the community. What is the purpose of the process? It's there to ensure equity, fairness, consistency. The Planning Committee is the custodian of that process and with a mandate to administer it on behalf of the community in accordance with those principles. You've received a significant number of objections from residents. You've noted the number have reduced over time. This isn't because they're in favour, rather they've been worn down. Their faith and trust in those whose job it is to safeguard the process tarnished. They are spotting the breaches, flouting of planning consent and process. They observe granted conditions aren't being enforced and their objections discounted. Residents are reluctantly having to step in to request the application of rigour to a process that is very clear, but doesn't appear to them to be being upheld by those who offered to uphold it. For example, the applicant has repeatedly applied for changes to plans before completing previous changes. This breaches the stipulation that proposed drawings should feature the existing structure, as each previous existing structure does not in fact exist. Repeated objections by the parish council and recommendations to apply the process have also been discounted. Oakfields Avenue features buildings ripe for development. This is an appropriate progression. I can cite numerous instances where other residents have submitted applications and had them modified or refused. This has meant disappointment and sometimes frustration, but they have complied with the decisions. They have accepted compromise and modified aspirations so they remain in keeping. They have respected planning laws. Over the years, residents acknowledge planning decisions evolve. What was not acceptable before may now be. However, we have a different situation here. The applicant cannot say they weren't aware. Documented planning permission stipulated white windows. They have ignored this condition. Disregard for planning conditions is mirrored by disregard for the impact of the protracted build on neighbours. Polite requests to maintain integrity of the environment, grass verges, road surfaces, and reasonable access for their properties for themselves and visitors have been repeatedly ignored. Until the final 2 months, there was no one on site in authority to whom to communicate concerns. Finally, let's look at what a potential impact of tonight's decision could be. We know planning takes into account precedent. By granting this application, the committee will potentially be setting a precedent for future applicants to advocate for their particular preference, citing the precedent that this applicant has successfully ignored a condition of planning. This application has got muddy and complicated because residents believe process hasn't been followed. Again, the solution to the decision is that the decision complies with the process that was set up to avoid this ambiguity.
Thank you. Right. Colleagues, do you have any questions or points of clarification that you'd like to raise? Yes, Councillor Mason.
I'm trying to make sure I don't dip into aesthetics because I don't think we cover that. But just to be clear, the only objection I'm hearing is about the process. I'm not in any way demeaning that. It's about the process itself. Is there any objections to them being grey windows? And if the original applications had been the anthracite grey,
well, no other front-facing windows are white, and it is not in keeping with what was granted.
Okay.
And what other people, I should say, have perhaps themselves had to make adjustments and manage their aspirations for what they want to comply with the planning laws.
Lovely, thank you. Any further questions or points of clarification, colleagues? No, I'm seeing nobody indicate. In which case, I shall move us on to the ward member objector, which is Councillor Paul Ward. Councillor Ward, you will have 5 minutes.
Good evening, thank you. I've been approached by neighbours and the parish council on matters related to this site, including this retrospective application for a change to the previously approved windows. I believe there are 3 material grounds for rejecting this. Tonight, I ask you to judge for yourself using the photographs provided in my objection letter that I assure you have read and which was summarised in the officer's report. Firstly, it's against our neighbourhood plan. Nebworth Neighbourhood Plan is part of the district's development plan and all policies in it must be taken into consideration. I disagree with the officer's report conclusions and believe it contravenes at least 2 policies. Policy KBBE4 was given weight in the officer's report when considering the impact. It reads, all development must demonstrate good design. Development must demonstrate must respect local character, which includes Knebworth's Garden Village context. You need to assess the design of the windows and their context within the immediate street scene and the wider village character. I agree with the report that the street scene by this dwelling has houses of various scale. There are a row of smaller Picton houses and bungalows representing Knebworth's heritage that have been extended over time. I welcome this diversity, as does our neighbourhood plan. There is variation in the design of the buildings, both original and modified, and that diversity is part of the Garden Village heritage. But local character is defined by both the diversity of housing and the consistency across certain design elements, such as the materials used, the style of the roofing, and the setting of the properties on the street. I do not believe that these windows comply with policy KBBE4, and they're in a different style and colour to the vast majority in the vicinity that do reflect the Garden Village context, and they do not respect local character. However, the report does not highlight Neighbourhood Plan Policy KBDS1, which applies across the parish and states that development should respect or enhance the special character of Knebworth Village. These windows do not respect or enhance the village character, they do the opposite, and thus do not comply with this policy. And for clarity, I'm not referring to the policy KBEF4, the character area protected views, as this is for Oaklands Road, as the officer has clarified in our communication. Secondly, the design and materials are out of character with respect to the street scene. A characteristic of the dwellings in the vicinity is their consistent window design and colour. They almost universally have thick white frames with bars typical of the Garden Village style and Picton houses. Out of 38 other houses on Oakfields Avenue, all but one have white windows. One has brown windows not visible from number 14, and 33 houses have Georgian or other style bars. The planning portal has 127 planning applications for Oakfields Avenue since 1976. This level of design consistency has been maintained through many extensions by local residents until now. I do not believe there is sufficient mitigation to allow this detrimental anomaly to be approved. The officer's report, paragraph 335, says that the setback nature of the dwelling, together with hedging to the front boundary, significantly reduces these visual impacts. I disagree that the visual impact is reduced. You can see for yourself in the pictures in my objection. Firstly, the extended dwelling is not set back relative to the 4 other adjacent dwellings. They form a consistent building line. Thus, number 14 maintains a prominent visibility right in the centre of the avenue. Look at page 49 in your own report pack. Secondly, the hedge does not significantly mitigate the jarring visual impact of the grey windows across 2 stories versus the adjacent properties. You can clearly see this from the public road, as my pictures on pages 2 and 3 of my objections show, and the other photos you've seen tonight. The impact of these windows could have been obscured by the large tree that used to be at the front of the property, but this was felled. No such mitigation exists now. Finally, previous decisions by this committee gave clear direction twice, which was ignored. In application 2201-920, an extension was approved at this Planning Control Committee on the 17th of November 2022. Also, application 2300-619 was approved for roof alterations. In your approvals of both of these, condition 3 explicitly said the extensions hereby permitted shall be built in external materials to match the existing dwelling house unless otherwise agreed in writing by the LPA. Reason: to protect the visual amenities of the locality. This committee's decisions have been repeatedly ignored in what has been built. I urge you to assess the impact yourself, reject this application, to defend the authority of this committee, and to respect the value of our neighbourhood planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ward. Excellently timed contribution, very helpful. Right, colleagues, are there any questions or points of clarification for Councillor Ward? Nope. I think they don't have anything that they wish to ask you. I think you did a very good job highlighting the key points. Thank you. Right, in that case, I shall invite our officer to present an update or his response to the issues that have been raised during the contributions.
I have no further points of clarification to explain.
Okay, I'm also going to refer to our Development and Conservation Manager. Sean, was there anything that you wish to draw out before I move into debate on this?
I think one of the issues that's been raised has been to do with compliance with planning conditions and what the process is when developers fail to comply with planning conditions imposed on a planning permission. There are several options that are available to a local planning authority when there's been a breach of planning control through non-compliance with conditions. They are take enforcement action, serve an enforcement notice, serve a breach of condition notice against which there's no right of appeal, or invite a retrospective application to regularise what has occurred. The most common approach is the latter, and that's the approach that was taken in this instance, if it's not totally clear as to what the decision would be. The system is not punitive. Just because you failed to comply with a condition doesn't mean that an applicant should be punished in that sense. But in order to maintain planning control, those three methods are at our disposal. As I said earlier, the most common method of dealing with it is to invite a retrospective application, because that's the least punitive way of moving forward and allows the merits of what has been done to be fully considered. And that's what we have in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I sort of move us onwards and into the debate on this item, I think it's worth pointing out, obviously, we've heard a little bit about the history of previous applications on this site. While that's background and context and might paint a picture, what members are considering this evening is the retrospective application that we've got before us, which is solely in respect of the windows and doors that have been installed at the property. So issues in respect of the tree, what we may or may not feel about policy decisions or compliance with past conditions, while clearly it is very, very important, and we would usually expect any applicant to comply with conditions that are applied to an application. Those are matters that we can't consider. We are looking at the specific retrospective application and considering it alongside the relevant policies that help us determine and weigh up our planning decisions. And if at any point members want additional clarification from officers on the policies that apply to this, then please say so. And I'm sure that Sean and Thomas will be able to advise on the relevant policies. So, colleagues, we've heard from our officers, we've heard the representations against the application. I have a report before me with an officer recommendation to grant. However, as always, it is open to the committee. Would somebody like to be bold and propose a motion one way or the other for us to launch into debate on this matter? Yes, Councillor Mantle.
I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommendation of the officer.
Thank you very much. May I have a seconder, please? Can I have a seconder for Councillor Mantle's motion? Doesn't mean that you're tied to agreeing with him. It merely helps me procedurally. Thank you, Councillor Fernandez.
Oh, yes, I second and reserve my right to speak.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Right, colleagues, we've had a proposal and seconded that we accept the officer recommendation to grant permission on this. May I have debate? Yes, Councillor Mantle.
My understanding is that we should be considering this on the basis, if this were the application before us in the first place, would it have been accepted? And my view is that the application that we have before us would have been accepted, and therefore we should have no grounds at all to refuse it.
Thank you very much. That was brief and sweet, and I appreciate it. Councillor Mason.
I think same point as Ian Mantle, but put in a different order. I think I was going to ask a question. Is it possible to take a view on if it had been included in the original application, whether it would have been the recommendation then would have been to pass it, or would it have been sufficient for the recommendation to be rejected? the application at that point if it had had the grey windows? That's for office. I guess that's a question for officers, if that's possible.
That is a question for officers. It's almost hypothetical and takes us backwards and rewriting history almost. I think to maybe support the committee, I can approach and reframe that question. And let's do a thought experiment. Let's pretend that this is the application at first instance before us. And the application is that the property be built with the grey anthracite windows lacking the Georgian bars. So the question to officers is, bearing in mind our relevant policies, the neighbourhood plan, the items that Councillor Ward and the objectors have referred to, what is your view of how those policies interact with this application? I see Anne MacDonald.
Thank you. I think obviously you've heard the policy tonight, but I think you have to take the road as a context in this particular house as it's in its location. And this dwelling is set well back from the road with quite a virgin frontage and sort of good trees screened down either side, which helps add screening and context to the locality. And furthermore, the neighbouring dwellings, there is front cladding on some of the properties that introduces sort of browny grey colour to the street scene. So I think it's maybe a little bit simplistic to think that the only colour in the street scene is white windows, when there is a variety of mix of colours in the street scene when you include the garage doors and you include cladding as well. So I think we'd obviously have to take that into account when if this application were for us first time round, whether or not there's any grey in the street scene that would also be regarded in keeping. I think my view is that probably would be regarded as in keeping this part of Oakfields Avenue, because there is a little bit more diversity with brick colour and tile cladding in the street scene in this immediate local context. So I think officer recommendation would likely to have been for approval based on those facts.
Thank you very much. I hope that assists colleagues. I think that from what Anne said and from the papers before us, my view is that the questions that we are weighing up this evening, colleagues, is this application consistent with the look and feel of the area, but also does this pose harm to that as well? And it's that classic weighing up and balancing act that we need to be cognizant of when we're reaching our decision. And these things are obviously always going to be, to an extent, subjective, but we have our policies to guide us. And it's now just a case of which side of the line do colleagues wish to fall on. I don't think I've put words into officers' mouths unreasonably. Hopefully that helps and assists members. Councillor Debenham.
Thanks. Is it too late to ask another question to the officers? The original application, did that ask for grey windows and the committee said you've got to be white?
An application proposed white windows, and there was a condition on the permission saying it's to be built in accordance with the materials. Obviously, as Sean explained, that didn't happen, and the applicant chose to put in the grey windows, and were invited to submit an application to retain it. As part of that process, we have to consider the merits of the windows in planning terms, which is why the application is before you tonight.
Thanks.
Yes, Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I think I'm missing something, because the application was for an extension to have the white windows which match the existing windows in the house. And it wasn't to replace the windows in the house, but they've done that anyway. Is that correct? So they've done the extension with the grey windows, but then gone in and changed all the other windows in the house.
Yes, Councillor Peace.
Sorry, I'm just coming back in with a question there. So were the windows originally white before the extension was carried out?
Yes, I'm seeing our officers nod in that regard.
Sorry, to refer to the applicant, this is at some point in the past they were green, because in the process of the works they stripped paint off and found green paint under white paint. So at some point in the past the windows were not white.
However, colleagues, obviously what we're considering this evening isn't the compliance or non-compliance with past conditions. It's the application that is before us, and it is not our place to make a ruling or a determination as to whether or not the applicant has been reasonable or unreasonable in respect of their compliance with the previous conditions. We are simply concerning ourselves with whether or not this application is compliant with planning policies that apply in this authority. Councillor Tyson.
Well, I'm not going to make judgments about the applicant and their motivation and behaviour in any of this, but I will say that the sticking point here is, why was the condition imposed in the previous application, not whether it was complied with or not. So what was it about the previous application that made the officer say, we believe that these original style windows should be retained, and that no longer pertains? Now, I do understand the point that we're effectively looking at a new application, and I know the road. I've been up it several times and counted who's got what kind of windows there, and they're not all quite as coherent and consistent as a street image as maybe we've been led to believe by some people, and there are some quite startling departures from that kind of white Georgian style window, quite apart from these anthracite ones. And also I would support the point that I don't think these houses were built with white plastic windows in the first place, so that may not be the be all and end all in terms of design. But if you want to come back to the point about why that condition was imposed and no longer has the strength that it did, that would be interesting.
It's a relatively standard approach to impose such a condition, because it introduces control on the matters at hand. So, for example, if one is applying for extensions to a dwelling house, it is quite standard to require that the materials match the existing dwelling house, including window details, because it can quite often appear incongruous if you have windows of one particular design and colour on a house, and on the same house, windows of a completely different design and colour. So the aim is actually to achieve consistency in relation to that house, and not necessarily in relation to what's around it. So that's, when dealing with extensions, the main aim is to achieve consistency relating to that dwelling house rather than anything else. And in this instance, all the windows have been replaced with grey anthracite windows. What we don't have, which might appear somewhat jarring and incongruous, is one white window next to, for example, an anthracite window. And that's what we do not have. And that's what the condition is mainly aimed at controlling.
Thank you for that explanation. Yes.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
In a related point, and once again, we're getting into hypothetical things, but we're trying to understand why something was thought to be necessary and now isn't. Would I be correct in saying that if they'd painted the windows grey before they'd made a planning application, that there would have been no control over that?
I've got two officers that want to speak. You can fight it out between yourselves.
Sections 55 of the Planning Act states that if you do external alterations which materially alter the appearance of the dwelling that is technically development, you then have to refer to the general principles of development order to see if that would be permitted development.
Right.
And if it was a hugely different outcome, then the answer would be no, that's not permitted development, and you would technically need planning permission for that change. However, if it was sort of a mild, a light grey with a brickwork but kind of blended in, you'd possibly stand back and say that it would not look materially different, in which case those works would be regarded as not development.
I think that was quite helpful, because I had a question along similar lines. I do like a but-for test. They are quite helpful. Right, colleagues, are there any further sort of points of debate or issues that members of the committee would like to raise and seek clarification on? Yes, Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I suppose I'm reflecting on some that one of the officers said about we're not. I just want to clarify this is correct. We're not allowed to be punitive, because I suppose as a committee we don't like people to not keep to the conditions are put there. But I believe we were told we're not allowed. It is not the role of this committee to be punitive, which I suppose weighs on how I think about it.
Thank you very much. And yes, just for clarification, our role is not to rule on whether or not we like the applicant, whether or not we think they should or shouldn't have complied with the previous conditions, etc. Our role here is to merely determine the application before us on its own merits as a standalone issue. Essentially, we cannot punish applicants for non-compliance, despite whether or not we may have strong views about past behaviour. So colleagues, the proposal is that we grant in accordance with the officer's recommendation. I think we've debated the issues and sort of explored the points around the change of colour and the change of style of the windows and considered policy. I am padding for time in case other members wish to contribute. I see nobody indicating, in which case I've had a proposal. It has been seconded. We've debated it. May we please have a vote?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Right. If members wish to leave or stay, that is entirely up to you. I'll allow you to leave the room briefly. Colleagues, it's 18 minutes past 8 and a couple of seconds. I will boldly assume that you're happy and content to progress on to the next item. Yes, yes, yes. Good. I'm seeing nobody indicate that they want a break. We're all good. Excellent. Good. So the next application that we have this evening is application 24/00671/FP, Greenside, London Road, Langley, Hitchin, Hertfordshire, SG47PP. And McDonald to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I have two updates on this item which have been previously emailed around the committee members and posted on the website. One is an updated response from Hertfordshire Highways now stating no objection and supporting the recommendation. The second is from the Hertfordshire Public's Right of Way team suggesting measures to reduce traffic speeds on the access road to ensure safety of those using footpath number 14. And as a result, an additional condition number 17 is recommended to cover this issue. This application is for the removal of the existing bungalow and buildings on the site and for 6 new houses to be constructed. There's an extant permission for 4 large detached houses, each with a detached double garage. There was an error regarding the site area, and as a result, when that application was determined, it was determined at delegated level. However, this application is before the committee tonight for determination as the site area is 0.51 hectares. So it's just above the threshold of 0.5 hectares, requiring the residential development to be presented to yourselves for determination. Can I have the first slide, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. So the application site is brownfield land within the Greenbelt and neighbours a Grade 2 listed building, the Ford, which can be seen as shaded purple on the map and sits directly in front of the application site between the application site and the road. Paragraph 154, criteria G of the NPPF allows for brownfield land redevelopments within the Greenbelt as an acceptable exception to Greenbelt policy, providing the resulting development does not have a greater impact on Greenbelt openness. This is the justification for this proposal. In built floor space terms, the 6 proposed houses are a reduction in built floor space in comparison to the amount of development on the site. Individually, these houses are smaller than the approved homes, and whilst there is an increase in the numbers from 4 in the extant scheme to 6 before you tonight, in combined floor space terms, these 6 dwellings are still smaller than the existing buildings on the site and is only slightly larger in footprint terms than the extant scheme. The extant scheme was for 2-storey houses, and these are shallow bungalows before you, so they have a slightly lower ridgeline, in my view, actually help enhance openness on the site. Can I have the next slide, please? I have a number of slides, so I'm going to move through these fairly quickly. This is the existing access of London Road, which remains unchanged by this proposal. The listed building, the Forge, is the immediate left. So can I have the next slide, please? That's the listed building. Next slide, please. This shows the corner of the rear garden between the end elevation of the listed building and the access road. And this is going to remain unchanged. You can just make out the roofs of some of the buildings in the background, which will be demolished. Next slide, please. This is the footpath map, and the application site is going to see the bright blue line. Footpath 14 sits the south of the application site and footpath 20 to the north. Next slide, please. This is the image of footpath 14 running south alongside the application site. Next slide, please. This shows where the access road crosses over footpath 14 with the wooden gate in the background, where it continues alongside the side path of the Ford, which is to the left of the wooden gate. Next slide, please. This is looking into the main site and showing some of the buildings to be demolished. Next slide, please. Again, the existing dwelling to be demolished. Next slide, please. The existing buildings to be demolished. Next slide, please. A sort of long range shot showing the range of buildings to be demolished. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan is existing. You can note some of the buildings are quite large. And then next slide, please. This is the proposed layout plan. The benefit of this plan is that it shows the access road is to be continued through the site with 3 dwellings positioned on the north and south side each. Rear of the forge and rear of footpath number 14, that part of the site has been opened up with an area of open landscaping and 4 visitor spaces. So in terms of impact on the heritage asset, this application is actually considered to represent an improvement to the setting of the listed building by removing kind of ramshackly looking existing buildings and having a sort of open space and landscaping next to it. Next slide, please. It's a typical elevation of the dwellings. There's two dwelling types. They're all the chalet bungalow type with sections of cladding and traditional brick, which is considered to be appropriate in the location for being a rural building and also complementary to the style of the forge. Next slide, please. This is a visual slide. The top is the existing, it's not overly clear. The bottom is the proposed and the views from London Road. It actually shows you've got a reduction in buildings happening across the site. Next slide, please. And again, existing and proposed visuals plans to show how the site is changing. So in officer opinion, whilst the mass on the site is being rearranged, it's not considered that there'd be greater harm on openness or greater impact on openness from this proposal, and it's recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you colleagues have any questions or points of clarification they wish to raise? Yes, Councillor Mantle.
On that last picture, there were 5 houses shown on it and there's applications for 6. I'm confused.
Can we go back? So I thought it was I put the one in from the wrong. You're right.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, so they've not put in the one by the in the back top. Sorry about that. I didn't spot that. Good spot. Sorry.
So despite that drawing, can we safely assume that the intent is to build the 6 dwellings, and this is an error on the part of the architects?
If we go back to the proposed layout plan, that obviously is correct, and that showed the 6 dwellings in that one. That shows them in their location, and actually the figures are based on 6 dwellings, so the figures are correct in the report. So even though the visual is incorrect, there still will be a reduction in built floor space on the site.
We do have the applicant's representative here as well. So if colleagues would like to ask that question when it comes to the appropriate point in the committee, I'm sure we will be provided with the appropriate clarification on record. Right. Are there any further questions or points of clarification that you wish to raise with Anne? Nope, I'm seeing nobody indicate, in which case that neatly takes us on to the applicant's agent, which is Lee Alexander. Lee, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, Madam Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. Just quickly to say apologies. It was actually Lee Alexander that was supposed to be here. I'm just taking his place. I'm Nikki, Nikki Alexander, but I'm here on behalf of Figment Architecture. And thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. This is a proposal for the new housing stock, which relates to the existing permission on the site for 4 dwellings. The site has got substantial history, but the main focus of the approval of the 4 detached dwellings approved in 2023. In response to the case officers, hang on a second, sorry. The scheme seeks to change the location of the access road to draw the cars straight down to the back of the site. I've totally. In terms of massing, as was pointed out by the planning officer, the revised scheme proposes 818 square metres gross external area, and the existing buildings on the site amount to approximately 1,150 square metres. This reduction in build form can only enhance the character and appearance of the locality and results in substantial improvement to the openness of the green side. The current permission outlines a scheme that is slightly dated in terms of outline and appearance. This proposal introduces traditional pitch roofs and external materials that are more in keeping with the rural building styles found in the local area. The house types featured in subtle variations in design to add interest to the development, incorporating alternative materials and detailed brickwork. The design elements include a multi-stock brick plinth, oak-framed features, and horizontal board cladding. Special attention has been given to the street-facing elevations to create visual interest and add variety to the built environment. The applicant's intention is to develop a style in form that is more in keeping with its surroundings, enhancing the greenside setting. We would like to reiterate that the office is supporting this application, concluding the benefits of the scheme as providing new dwellings and the associated benefits, improvements to the openness of the greenbelt, and a substantial reduction in vehicle movements. To summarise, all material planning conditions have been considered and dealt with appropriately. The proposed development meets current policies and requirements as outlined in the case officer's report. The design approach is a traditional low-rise form of development that will be carefully integrated into the existing landscape setting with no greater impact than the current permission. The principle of development has already been agreed by way of the existing permission, and for these reasons, we trust that you will be able to support the proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And just on a minor procedural point, given the theme of this evening is retrospective actions, ordinarily, if a speaker hasn't registered to speak in advance, we wouldn't accept or take those comments. However, I take the view that you are in fact from the same organisation as we ought to have been hearing from, and I am certain that there is a very good reason why the specific personality wasn't here. And I'm confident that the contribution you've provided to the committee this evening is indeed consistent with the contribution that Lee would have made had he been present and able to attend. So I'm quite happy for the committee to take full account of the representation that we have just heard. And I don't think that it fetters or in any other way undermines any decisions that we might reach on this application, colleagues. Right, there we go. Formal bit done. Different formal part. Colleagues, any questions, points of clarifications that you have for the applicant's agent? Nope, I'm seeing nobody indicate to speak, in which case, colleagues, the officer recommendation is to grant permission, but as always, I am happy to take any proposal from the committee. So could I have a proposal? Councillor McDonnell.
That we grant permission.
So we have a motion that we follow the officer recommendation to grant permission. May I have a seconder? Oh, yes. Oh,
Condition 17 on the update.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I apologise, Anne, I didn't give you the opportunity to come back. I've boldly assumed that you don't have any additional points to add in on this.
That's fine, no, because obviously that's fine. As long as 17 is included in your recommendation, we know what we're doing. No, thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, colleagues. So looking for a seconder, and I see Councillor Tyson.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. Thanks, Chair, and reserve my right to speak.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, colleagues. So any points on debate, colleagues? I am seeing nobody indicate that they are wishing to debate this application. Going once, twice? No. All right. May we please have a vote, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Marvellous. Thank you very much, colleagues. And that brings us on to the final item of business this evening, which is agenda item number 9, planning appeals. I shall ask Sean Greaves to give us an update on those.
Thank you, Chair. We've got one application that we've received, which I did mention at the last meeting, actually, which is an appeal against the refusal of planning permission for 42 dwellings on a site east of Respring and Orwell View in Baldock, and a hearing has been arranged for that. And that hearing is scheduled to be held on the 21st of November. And any members who wish to attend the hearing, it's a public hearing, you can attend and make representations at that hearing. And in terms of appeal decisions that we've had one appeal decision since the last meeting, and that appeals relates to householder application for dormer window, and other windows to the to facilitate a conversion of the loft space, and the inspector upheld our decision and dismissed the appeal for the reasons set out in the summary and in the actual attached appeal decision notice. And that's it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, colleagues. Any questions for Sean on appeals? Any additional points of clarification that colleagues wish to draw out at this time? No, I'm seeing no one indicate. Thank you very much, Sean. I do think it is really useful and really important that we keep an eye on the appeals that have gone through, and especially be mindful of where the inspector reaches a different outcome to either what our officers have stated or what the committee says, or indeed where the inspector does agree with decisions that we've taken as an authority. I think that there are some really great learning opportunities contained within these appeals and the decision notices. And given that this committee does perform a quasi-judicial function and our decisions can be challenged, I think it's a great personal development point to keep on top of what's going through in those spaces as well. And obviously be mindful of any policy developments that might come through, and please ensure that your knowledge is up to date. And I'm sure if you have any questions about learning, support, training, development, our officers, not me, will point you in the relevant direction of all the wonderful information you can find about planning. Right. In that case, that concludes the business of this evening's committee. The next planning committee is on the 21st of November. I will say that again, the next committee is the 21st of November. The committee that was listed for the 7th of November has been cancelled, as we need to move the business around a little. So colleagues, I shall see you in roughly 1 month's time. Thank you very much.